What's up and welcome back to Interpreting the Scares. That's right, we're back at it on our month-long journey through the nightmares with the first film this month that I've actually seen before. There's like maybe 8 movies on this entire list that I have seen in the past, and this is the first one. And it is scored insanely high over on Rotten Tomatoes. I mean, we're talking like 98% fresh, which is scary surprising to me, but since it's been a few years, I thought it would be nice to kind of revisit it. So without further ado, my thoughts on The Loved Ones. The Loved Ones is a 2009 Australian horror film directed by Sean Byrne that ultimately follows Brent, played by Xavier Samuel, who on prom night is kidnapped by Lola, an obscure and deranged teenage girl, and her father as well, after Brent basically turned this girl down when she asked him to the school dance. Henceforth, he's tortured in the most atrocious and unimaginable of ways. The longer that he's held prisoner, the deeper that he discovers their madness runs. So yeah, I remember seeing this for the first time, I think it was 6 years ago in 2016. The film follows somewhat of a trope, since I feel like I've seen it before where a prom date specifically is kidnapped and tortured by weirdos. I would say that the main subgenre, when it comes down to horror for this film specifically, I think you would categorize it in torture porn. That's a subgenre that I'm not always a fan of, since the story itself doesn't always have much of a point. There's a few torture films that I definitely love. Specifically speaking, we're talking about Saw. That's a big one, and that's pretty much because there's a moral, or maybe, I guess, immoral justification that Jigsaw finds that I think is amazing. I love how those movies connect. I love the escape room mechanics. I love the mystery. I love the sheer twisted creativity found in those traps. I love all that, more so than I love it for the torture alone, which is kind of how I see this movie. A couple of weirdos that are torturing this dude just because they're weird, and just to torture. That's how I felt about it. So a lot of it felt relatively pointless at the end of the day in terms of creating a lasting impression, but strictly speaking, the film follows a somewhat original story, blending the tropes that you might find in both teen films and horror alike, which is interesting, don't get me wrong, but I honestly don't think that it's as smart as it thinks it is. So I had a hard time connecting with any of the characters. I felt like this side story in the film, which followed a friend of Brent's at the prom with an emo chick, it was funny at times, but it was mostly extremely random. Like, it connected in a way, but not enough to actually contribute all that much to the plot. So these characters and their story ended up feeling pointless overall. So I feel like this appeals to horror fans that don't want that much from their movies. Like, they just want gore, they want crazy characters, they want stuff like that. And you'll get that here. I'm not saying that it's not decently made in general either, because it was. It was memorable in a lot of different ways, in how it looks, in how it plays out. And the performances weren't bad, and that's pretty important. There's a decent display of practical effects there, and even the overall storyline gets to be a bit unpredictable, if we're being honest, because it follows a somewhat non-typical structure, and that's good. I don't really think that it's scary, but I did appreciate the slow build-up of events when it came down to just how crazy these people were and what they were ultimately willing to do. That gave the movie a fair sense of pace. All around, I can easily and safely say that the film was decent, and I can fully understand why a certain group of horror fans would love it. Me, though, it's not really my cup of tea. And I was personally disinterested in the film after a while, and I just kind of wanted it to end. Though, props to the bleach thing, to the vocal cords, that was original. That was diabolical, and that was awesome. And immediately challenged the sound designer to actually do something that nobody had done before, and I feel like nobody has really done since, so that's really, really important to point out. Other than that, let's pop up my score for a second, which, as you can see, it's an okay letter grade of B- with a final score of 71%. Nothing too crazy, but obviously a far cry from the Rotten Tomatoes score of 98%. My score is comprised of the unbiased score of 74% and biased score of 68. Obviously, certain things aren't my cup of tea, like I said, but it is made well enough, and I can certainly understand why some people would not only find it memorable, but also love it for certain things. And if you're somebody that absolutely loves it, I would really like to hear why in the comments section down below, and as for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit the like, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell to be notified when I come out with my next horror film review for Interpreting the Scares. And until then, peace out!